So we're gonna start today. We're gonna jump into a new section, but what I wanted to, before we started, I was on Twitter this morning and someone shared an awesome quote from Gemara that I actually thought was kind of awesome. Let's see if I can find it here. It is a professor, Erica Brown, who she quotes a little bit of Talmud every day. And she quotes this from a tractate called Chulin on 27b. He says, or she quotes the Talmud, which says, quote, "A passerby from Galilee taught." Right, so that's the little line she's quoting about. It said, "A passerby from Galilee taught." She says, "What? How unusual for the Talmud to include a teaching without the name of a teacher. Even passersby can be teachers when their teaching is memorable." And so I wanted to put that kind of before us, to say, like, there's so much we can learn, not just from the Talmud, but from each other. Without, it might take some time before it kicks in. Right? I'm imagining I'm sitting in that Beit Midrash. Somebody walks by, gives a teaching, they're gone. It's not till later that I realize how important it was for us.
But I think another aspect of that is that, we talk about the rabbis and think about the yeshiva, the established academies, the established groups. Here's somebody who is a passerby, right? Not one of the rabbis, right? Had it been one of the rabbis, they would have said, given a name. So I think it's that they're learning from somebody who's not part of the establishment, who's not, an ordained rabbi. Right. Somebody who happened by and taught something worthwhile.
We don't know anything about them.
Excuse me, I find it interesting that it's a man from Galilee. Wasn't Jesus from Galilee?
Could have been.
Yeah, although a bit earlier.
Could have been.
I mean,
probably not who's being quoted in the Talmud in this case.
But it's interesting today. Erev Yom Tov.
Sure. Right. For those who are celebrating Christmas, which is tonight and tomorrow. The other thing I wanted to say is today what we're going to do is we're going to be a little bit verses heavy, and so what I did today with Mimi's help in the office, so you should say thank you to her.
Thank you, Mimi.
I put together just kind of a collection of these verses. So I'm going to hold on to one and just share, because I only made 6 of them. So yeah, they're in the order of them being quoted, and I just thought that way it'd be easier to reference. So I just want to point out that the second verse and the third verse.
Okay.
We can give one to Rabbi now.
Great.
Okay.
That the second one and the third one are read after one another, but in the opposite order. So this is the order that they're quoted in the Talmud, not where they show up in the Torah. So you'll see Deuteronomy 23:24, which we haven't seen, but if you go down to the bottom, it says Deuteronomy 23:22, which we have seen. So what we're gonna, exactly. So this time I thought it would be nice if I brought some verses together. So yeah, so Safaria, which is an amazing tool, has a little sheet maker. Another time I'll show you how to make it.
Totally cool.
It's awesome. So
I've started using it because it's often easier than translating all the passages.
for sure, I like to pull it right into Google Docs and then play with it there personally.
Sure.
Okay, so let's just do a little bit of review, just in terms of remembering what we're talking about, which is, a conversation is being had about this mitzvah of "you shall not delay." So let's look at our verses, since that's where it comes from. And we're looking at the last one, 23:22 from Deuteronomy, and it says, "When you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not put off fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will require it of you, and you will have incurred guilt." So the part where it says, "do not put off fulfilling it," lo te'acher means "you shall not delay." This is just a different translation for the same thing. That phrase is what we've been talking about for the last number of weeks, which is, how long I've made a vow to bring an animal to the temple. I've done so voluntarily. How long do I have until I've crossed the threshold to "you shall not delay"? And we get a number of different answers. Well, it's 1 festival, it's 3 festivals, it's potentially 5 festivals if you count by Passover, whatever. All sorts of different declinations on that. the analogy we've used to kind of explain what this looks like in real life is, I invite you for dinner, and for some reason it hasn't happened yet. How long do I have? Like if I say, hey, come over for dinner, how long do I have before that invite is no good? Right? How long have I reached the point of you shall not delay in having me for dinner? Right? That's kind of the analogy. So
Oh, wait a minute, this doesn't say anything, that's only fulfilling it to God. It doesn't say to the other person.
That's true. That's true. The analogy does break at some point, but that's just the framework of imagining, right? I've done something, I've made a vow on myself, right? No one's obligated me to do it other than I've done it for myself. And the recognition that circumstances can come in, the dinner can get rained out, somebody gets sick, there's a substitute dinner, there's all sorts of different circumstances. So for the most part,
find the first dinner.
Right, you find the first dinner. Right. So we are going to start off on page 268 in your packet. And what this section is going to do is it's going to go line by line in one of these verses and explain it relevant to our verse. And you will find, as we get kind of deeper into it, we'll kind of pull apart this "you shall not delay" thing a little bit further. Okay, right before we begin, we always want to make sure we point out our technical terms. So look in the Aramaic with me. The first two words are Tanu Rabbanan. Does everybody see that? Does anybody not see it? First two words, Tanu Rabbanan, right at the top. First two words in the Aramaic. This is the same thing, almost, as Titania, right? It was taught in a Baraita. Can someone remind me what a Baraita is?
It's a teaching that's not inside of the stuff.
Exactly. It's not in the Mishnah. It's from the same period as the Mishnah, so it holds some authority. All right, so Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a Baraita. Look at the last two words, Mitzvat Aseh. This is not a Talmud term, rather a Jewish legal term. A mitzvah aseh is a positive mitzvah. It's a mitzvah that you do, right? If you were to take that kind of translation. Everybody with me? If you go down to the next line, you'll see lo ta'aseh. Anyone want to make a guess?
Yeah.
Mitzvah lo ta'aseh is a negative mitzvah, right? Positive mitzvah, negative mitzvah. Okay, there's other words in there that are good vocab words, but that's not always why we're doing it. So those are the big three things I wanted to point out. Tanu Rabbanan, Mitzvah Taseh, and Mitzvah Lo Taseh. Okay, we're going to go slow. If someone, you can have your verse sheets ready. Would someone like to read for me in English to start off with? Go for it.
So the sages taught in a Baraita. The verse states, that which has gone out of your lips you shall keep and do as you have vowed as a gift to the Lord your God, which you promised with your mouth.
Okay, I just want to pause. That verse comes almost immediately after the one we've been studying. Read the one we've been studying, it's the last one on here.
So when you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not put off fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will require it of you, and you will have incurred guilt. And then you hear the very next one. You have to do what you said you're going to do.
Right. So I want to read the one that's in between, which I think is really relevant, right? So it says, verse 22 in Deuteronomy 23, it says, when you shall make a vow, like you read, Lord your God, do not put off fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will require it of you, and you shall have incurred guilt. Verse 23, whereas you incur no guilt if you refrain from vowing. And then it says, you must fulfill what has crossed your lips. Right? So these things come as a little unit. All right? Now we're going to go phrase by phrase and explain it in the Gemara. Does anyone want to make a guess at some of these things might mean?
I don't have a guess of anything. When I'm reading down, it says, as a gift. So are we talking like a gift of thanks? And is the gift and the vow is not the same? So there's sort of a contradiction in there right off.
Right. So the Hebrew word is nidavah, which does have some parallel terms inside with sacrifices. There is a gift offering, right? right? Gift, right? Right?
Talk
Thanksgiving.
about not being the same thing as gift.
Exactly right.
But I think verse 23, right, kind of gives us a clue because it talks about you're not obligated to make the vow. So I think when it says gift, it's talking about something that you give without an obligation, as opposed to the obligatory sacrifices.
Not deep.
That puts it right.
So you've taken on this obligation. You had no, you didn't have to do it. But once you've taken it on, then you have to fulfill.
Okay, keep going, Rabbi Diane. That which has gone out.
That which has gone out of your lips, this is a positive mitzvah. The mitzvah aseh. You shall keep. This is a prohibition. And the phrase "you shall keep" is a warning to keep oneself from sinning.
Now, in the Rashi tells us that this word where it says tishmor, right, you shall keep, is one of a number of different words that always tell us that a prohibition is coming. Like another one is lest you do something, right? That tells us it's a prohibition. All right, keep going.
And do. This is an admonition to the court to make you fulfill your vow. As you have vowed, this is referring to a vow offering. To the Lord your God, this is referring to sin offerings, guilt offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings, teaching that one must keep his word and bring them. As a gift, this is understood in its literal sense to be referring to a gift offering, which you promise. This is referring to objects consecrated for temple maintenance. With your mouth, this is referring to vows of charity, to which one commits himself with his mouth.
Nice. I hope everyone would have gotten that from just the verse. I'm just kidding. Oh yeah, pass her one of those sheets. Great. Okay, so that was a ton of information. Let's go back and break down. We're at the very first paragraph on 268. We're gonna go slow. We'll have plenty of time to catch up, not to worry. Okay, so we have this verse. That which has gone out of your lips you shall keep and do as you have vowed as a gift to the Lord your God, which you have promised with your mouth. This whole paragraph is the Baraita. The Baraita is teaching the verse and all the little pieces that come with it. So first, that which has gone out of your lips, the rabbis understand, is to tell us that this thing is a positive mitzvah. Okay, so not a prohibition. Making a vow is like a good thing, presumably, right? It's a positive thing. It's not that mitzvot are like doing good deeds, but this is not a prohibition when you say, I'm making a vow.
Well, it's saying that you will do it.
Right.
I mean, you're committing yourself to do something.
Right. I am now
That's the
obligated to do
positive
it.
side of it.
Right. And not obligated not to do it.
Right. And I think that distinction is important, that it's not saying you are obligated to make the vow. The positive mitzvah is once you make the vow, you now have a positive obligation to fulfill.
Exactly. You shall keep. This is a prohibition. Meaning to say, what?
Honor your word.
Honor your word, right? If you don't honor your word, you've transgressed. And in the context of what we were talking about, you shall not delay is probably in here somewhere. And do. This is an admonition to the court to make you fulfill your vow. Meaning to say what?
You said you're going to do it, so you're responsible for it.
Not only are you responsible, but we're going to hold you responsible.
So the court has the authority to compel, I mean, it's something that you have to do, now that you've obligated, you have to do it yourself of your own will, but the court can pressure you.
Right.
If it's like in Israel today, I mean, if somebody refuses to give a get, the courts can throw him in jail until they...
But let's take, that's its own giant ball of wax, so I want to be careful of using that as an analogy here, but I think that's, there are smaller cases, right? I could say, I'm not going to eat any more pastries for breakfast. And I'm going to say it publicly, and everyone can hold me accountable to not eating pastries for breakfast.
That feels a little odd because it's a you're phrasing a say mitzvah in low terms. I mean, it's confusing.
Got it. So we're holding multiple types of mitzvahs, right?
Right, but what I'm can I suggest it?
Yeah.
One that's clearer to me.
Please.
So I promise that I vow that I am going to give, say, my daughter a gift on her birthday. I mean, that's something that is not required that I do, but that I have said out loud that I'm going to do it, and it's something that I can, in fact, it's a thing. It's something that...
It's a positive mitzvah.
Yeah, it's a transaction that's
Right.
going to happen. Okay.
Right. And so then the next piece would be, if you don't do it,
Right.
You've transgressed your own prohibition
That's right.
of not keeping it. Who holds you liable?
So apparently the court, although I was going to say, in the case of this
Right.
particular thing, it would be the court might be my family.
Right?
You know,
Right.
who are sitting as the court.
Right. Now, I think it's really important to know, in the eyes of the Gemara, when they say someone makes a vow, this is a public notarized document that's happening in front of the court in the first place. Right? So it's as if you went to a notary and said, hey, I'm going to give a gift.
Right.
You've now put yourself in a category here. Right? Very literally. Exactly.
But wait a minute, I have a question here.
Yeah.
If I'm supposed to, it says this is vows you made to God. That's the way I read it.
Mm-hmm.
So with regards to a gift for my child,
Right.
that doesn't count.
So I think, so the context in which these vows are usually offerings to the temple, which is where you get the to your God part.
Right.
But I think every vow is where you're taking God's name, right? It's sealed in God's name. Meaning to say, if you don't fulfill it, even if it's for somebody else, you've made a promise to God as a part of it.
Well, you're expanding the definition then.
No, I'm saying when it says like in the like the Ten Commandments, don't take the Lord's name in vain.
Right.
This is the kind of thing they're talking about. This is where you make a promise and you don't follow through. That's taking God's name in vain.
Okay.
And maybe I am expanding it. But I think a vow is very much sealed in using God's name. This is a declaration.
But what I see, it's clear that you said it says you vow as a gift to the Lord your God.
Right.
That's who you made the vow to.
Right.
You didn't make it. I didn't.
You're 100% right. And we don't have, the last time you made a ram sacrifice, when was that?
I think you made
But like, so it's hard for us to really comprehend what that like what it really looked like.
Right.
So we have to use analogy. You're right, but the analogies are flawed.
Right.
Absolutely, you're right. I'm sorry?
It's not really fun because the basic idea is if you make a promise, you should keep it.
Yeah.
And that's the
That's
bottom
true.
line.
That's true.
It's a big
All the
bottom
trappings don't always fall through, but you're 100% right.
So to make this really fit, I could say, like, you know, this is going to be B'li Neder. Okay?
Right.
You have to say, I swear to God that this year I am going to send the implication being maybe I didn't do it in past years. I'm really, I want to be on the record as saying I'm going to do it this year. But then being on the record means that somebody's going to hold you accountable.
Right. The record.
For what the record is going to hold you accountable for
Exactly.
what you said you're going to do. So.
Exactly.
And I think nowadays we have the sense that that accountability is between us and God, and should we fail, well, we have Yom Kippur to consider that. But for them, when they're talking about the court, they mean a court
Right.
with judges that will issue a judgment against you in some way.
So while we hold all of this content in one hand, I also want to just hold like the meta-analysis here, which is the rabbis are taking a verse and they are breaking it words by words to help us understand a circumstance. I just want to like hold those things in tension. Okay? All right, let's keep going. As you have vowed, right in the middle of the paragraph, as you have vowed, this is referring to a vow offering. Okay, we're bringing our context back into it. This is we're talking about vows. To the Lord your God. This is referring to sin offerings, guilt offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings. Teaching that one must keep their word and bring them. So I want to point out, early on when we studied this a number of weeks ago, we had a list of offerings. And we had this whole conversation about, okay, this list is missing these things, and this list is including those things. Like, how are we going to square it? We have a little bit of that here, where we started to outline what things are in the category and what aren't. According to this verse, We have vow offerings, which we've been working with, that is our assumption, as well as sin offerings, guilt offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings, all of which are different types of offerings.
Well, it said, the way they explained
Yeah.
it, it's different types of vow offerings.
Right.
Okay, I mean, that's
All of them require us to make a promise and
Right.
fulfill them. You are right.
But I think to speak to Dan's point, I think this where they break this is significant, right? Because the sin offerings, guilt offerings, burnt offerings, peace offerings, right? It's saying these are obligations to God. The vow offering may be an obligation we've made to another person.
Right.
I mean, I think they're drawing the Gemara is drawing that distinction.
Are they narrowly?
The vows in general and
Yeah.
specific offerings that are to God. We've sinned, we have to make atonement to
Well,
God.
it's expanding the analogy of a vow offering is to a person, all these other types of offerings are to God.
Right. As a gift, this is understood in the literal sense to be referring to a gift offering. I just want to point out, this is sort of, to me this jumped out as a bit of an anomaly, which is like so much of this is not literal, but this one is. I found that to be so fascinating. Which you have promised, this is referring to objects consecrated for temple maintenance, right? These are things you have promised with your mouth. This is referring to the laws of charity, to which one commits themselves with their mouth, right? I'm gonna give X, said tzedakah. So here, I just wanted to hold, right? We had a whole verse, and we split it up. All of these little pieces, which is teaching us a lot. Everybody with me? Yeah.
Yes, so I'm going to say, to me, it doesn't feel totally logical that with your mouth suddenly only refers to tzedakah. You know, where is that? Because that feels like it's been narrowing a little bit, and all of a sudden it's narrowed way down. But there's nothing in it that says that to me. I mean, it's their interpretation of why shouldn't there be.
Are you prepared
To me, I feel like what we're talking about is a variety of different types of vows, right? And specifically, right, I'm putting myself in the mind of the rabbis, which is to say that every piece of text means one thing, right? And it's teaching one thing, meaning to say.
With your mouth equals tzedakah, but I guess what I'm saying is like
Vows of tzedakah, right, are bounded by this tiny part of this verse, which is with your mouth, meaning to say that this includes vows of charity. And I know this because, as opposed to perhaps vows of charity not being included, right, some other mechanism to include them. Here we're learning, I mean, this is how I read it, I could be wrong, which is with your mouth is telling us, no, we are including this. This is a part of the conversation, and I know this because I make these kind of promises with my mouth as opposed to in writing. Maybe. Yeah.
Can I point out that the last, from Ladonai Elohecha, to the Lord your God, mentions sin offerings, guilt offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings. Then Nidava, then the last three items that are interpreted. Nidava as a gift, which you have promised, and with your mouth. Those are all, I think, also subcategories. So Nidava is a free will offering, which you have promised, referring to objects consecrated for the temple maintenance. I don't remember which one it is, but one of the sins specifically is one of the offerings. Is maybe it's the burnt offering, is for violation of those things, because it seems that that's sort of stuck in there. This object consecrated for temple maintenance. I mean, that's like one of those is if you make an error with those things, if you mishandle one or something, and tzedakah, I guess perhaps is another kind of offering. So I think those are all sort of cases, sort of example cases of further things that you must fulfill, I think.
You know what?
Yeah.
I like that last one because I can picture Debbie Firestone and Rob Menace saying, yeah, we got to put that one in about the charity part. I mean, they got to cover their bases. I mean, they got to run the place.
Wait a second. We make pledges, as an analogy. I make a pledge to say I'm going to donate X amount of dollars.
Because the other things are going to God and not to the synagogue. I mean, you got to run the synagogue.
Right.
I mean,
That's not what this is teaching, but I like it.
Well, it's timeless, isn't it?
Very timeless.
Okay.
So I want to just pull a little bit on this thread Rabbi Allison brought up, which is I actually think it's more than what you're saying. It's that list starts much earlier, right? The moment it says, as you have vowed, it says vow offering, then sin offering. And we've started to pull these categories together, right? There are a lot more vow offerings than perhaps we even considered in our previous conversations, right?
Right, so I guess, okay, so you're taking vow offering as the umbrella under which all the other
these
things
I think so.
are.
I think so.
And that's how you're reading.
Right. So here's the question I want to ask before we move on. What did we learn here that we didn't already know?
There are more vow offerings than there were.
Right, there are more vow offerings, right? That's a great. Right, based on this other verse that we had been learning, right? Which is the last one on this list. What did we learn here that we didn't already know from the studying of the Gemara? For those of you who haven't been here before, you can make a guess.
It's that you have an obligation to fulfill what you say you're going to do, not just particular for vows, but for all these other types of offerings.
Got it.
This
is meant to be more inclusive.
extension.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
All obligations.
It's all obligation. So none of that answers the question, which is, I feel like we knew this, right? When I did my introduction, we started off by saying we have these vows. I have a time limit. I have an obligation to them. Yeah.
So what it is, this is going to sound weird, what it is not is what I was originally thinking, which was that it's this, and then the category narrows to this, and to this, and to this, and to this. What you're saying is all these different things are in fact in some way equal to each other, but they're all different kinds of things that fall under vow.
Perhaps.
I mean, that's
Perhaps, yeah.
I think a lot of the discussion till now has been talking about these sorts of vows that we make freely, right? That, this is not something we didn't have to take the vow. We made the vow, therefore we have it. But here we're now broadening it, because now they're bringing in sin offerings, guilt offerings, burnt offerings, peace offerings, which are not things that we vow. They're obligations that are placed on
I
us.
remember.
Yeah.
I think that's what I've been struggling with. It's like,
Well,
because you may not have said, maybe you're supposed to know without ever saying
Yeah.
it that you have to bring a guilt offering or something. Why would you have to say it with your mouth? You know what I'm saying?
Right. But that one is not particularly spelled out. There's more we can pull from that, for sure.
so am I getting this right? That all the things we were talking about before were things that you're just required to do, and the question is, if you're required at a certain time, and this is things that you're not necessarily required to do, but that you promised to do. Is that?
I actually think we know a lot of this already.
Yeah.
I don't think much. Some of this is not new, based on what we've learned before. Right.
What exactly did we add here?
Exactly. Right. There's a lot here. Maybe we didn't know exactly, like that mouth thing with tzedakah. That's new. I haven't seen that before. But a lot of this other stuff about making a vow and having to fulfill it are things we've seen before. There's a reason why I ask, which is the next section of Gemara is going to ask the very question. So what do we need this for? We already knew some of this. All right, let's go back into it. So I want to point out some of these phrases in the Gemara, like I do. So if you look at the second line, the first two words,
What's this?
it says Lama Li. Does everybody see that? What that means is, what do I need it for?
What's it to me?
Right, what's it to me? Right, but specifically, it's saying, I learned that, like, what do I need this for? I've learned this somewhere else already. Why do I need it? And then you'll see it actually again on the end of the third line, beginning of the fourth line. Right? Why did I need this? Where is this coming from? Okay. Can I get another volunteer to read the Gemara clarifies? I know we're going very slow today. Go for it.
The Gemara clarifies the details mentioned in this Baraita. The master said, that which is...
Wait, pause. And we learned a couple of weeks ago, right, when it says the master, it's just quoting who was above. They didn't want to say it by name, it's just whoever was above. Which, of course, is just the sages. All right, keep going.
The master said, that which is gone out of your lips. This is a positive mitzvah. Why do I need this derivation? Isn't the positive mitzvah derived from the verse? And there you shall come, and there you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifice and your tithes, and the offering of your hands, I understand that one, and your vows and your gift offerings to the firstborn of your and the firstborn of your herd and of your flock.
I'm going to pause you there for really quick. I only have the first half of the verse because I wasn't paying close enough attention. But right, this is coming from another verse, right? Because remember, the rabbis hold, this is really important, we talked about it a bit before, which is the rabbis want to say one verse means one thing to one rabbi. One. Meaning to say, another rabbi may derive something else from the same verse, or they may derive the same thing from that, or they might use that verse to do something else, right? It can go both directions. Let's see if I did this right. The verse and the meaning can be pulled from different places, right? So a verse can have two meanings to two different rabbis, or two meanings can go to one verse for two different rabbis, right? They use it for different reasons. I know, it's very confusing. So here, right, the master is saying, I see this thing, it says, which has gone out of your lips, which is a positive mitzvah. It says, I already knew this. This comes from this verse earlier in Deuteronomy, right? Which is, and there you shall come, and there you shall bring. That seems like a commandment to me, right? Keep going. The Baraita continues. Dan?
Oh, the Baraita continues. You shall keep. This is a prohibition. Why do I need this derivation? This is derived from the verse, you shall not delay paying it.
Great. Right, so the next part of the original Baraita said, you shall keep, which we already knew, right? You shall not delay. Everyone feel like they understand what's happening here?
No.
Okay. Thank you for saying so. No, that's why we go slow. We've done this for like 6 months and we're on the 5th page of the Gemara, right? We're not in a race, right? We take our time, right? So, meaning to say this, I say to you, okay, if you make a vow, you have to keep it. Rabbi Adelson comes up and says, if you make a vow, you have to keep it. You say, what do I need him for? You just told me. Although it should be the other way, he's the senior rabbi. I'm not trying to suggest anything else, right? Especially while he's out of the room. Right, so it seems to say, I already have this source that tells me this. What do I need this teaching to tell me this? I already know it.
It's a reinforcement.
So one
the same opinion, the same command from two different sources, we lose more credibility.
Except that what this paragraph is saying, here are verses from Torah that teach me this. Why do I need a secondary source? Right? In other words, the Torah is going to take precedence over the Baraita. Why did I need?
But if it's saying,
if I have the primary source, why do I need the secondary source?
Right. So one view is I need these two things to make sure I really get it. However, the rabbis don't really think that way, right? Repetition is good for us as humans, that's true. But the rabbis want to say, no, if I've already learned this somewhere else, this verse must do something else. It can't teach the same thing twice. To the rabbis. Not to us, but to the rabbis. Yeah.
Well, and so if you have, two different sources like that, perhaps there are two different meanings that we're supposed to draw from them.
100%, exactly right. The presumption is that if it seems like it's a repetition in Torah, it means there's something else I missed.
The shall keep and the not delay are two different points also.
That's true. It seems like they look different on the surface, but the rabbi is telling us, no, they're the same, which means that one of them has to mean something else. Right? I already knew that there was a prohibition attached to this, which is you shall not delay. It was only a verse and a half above. Right? I already knew this. This seems like this derivation should have given me a different explanation. Dan, you with us now?
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of. Well, so walk us through. Where are you?
I just finished the end.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Go ahead. Just keep going. I'll catch up.
Is everybody with us so far? Okay.
Is this not delay thing going to refer back to what we did originally with the holidays and the year? And
that's exactly right.
It's just going back
the same
to
one, right?
We're
holding on to do not, like, imagine it's like a zip line, right? We're holding on to you shall not delay and flying down the mountain, right? So we're holding on to that as our core piece for all of us, all right? That's why we're still holding on to it.
Okay, so is it possible that one of them is talking about, one of the verses is talking about the vows that we're required to make? You must bring sacrifice to the temple, you must get all of those ones that we were talking about earlier that you're required to make, and the second one is talking about the ones that you make voluntarily? Promises that you make voluntarily?
It's certainly possible. The Gemara doesn't give us that clarity, right? We don't know.
No, I'm wondering whether the verses do, whether that's the reason why there's two verses cited.
Or whether that's
It's certainly a possibility. I'm not going to tell you no, because you're as right as anybody,
All right, but
right? The Gemara hasn't told us. That doesn't make it wrong. It just means the Gemara hasn't told us. Okay?
A quick,
Yeah.
about when's the time frame of these things that we're reading?
Yeah. So this is a great review. The Baraita is around the 2nd century, but it's not edited for another couple of hundred years into this. So the fact that these two teachings come together
This is
a couple hundred years later.
after the temple's been destroyed.
Yes.
So why are we talking about things that you're supposed to do for the temple? Why can't they say this? Where do you take your sin offering?
Yeah. So that's a really great point, and it's so we're gonna hold this. Studying Talmud is a practice in holding multiple truths simultaneously. So one truth is the Torah still is telling us about offerings, and we can't lose them because the Torah is giving them to us. We need to do something, right? That's one charge we have.
And from their point of view, the temple might still be rebuilt. And if it gets rebuilt, then
For
we
sure.
have to know how to deal with it all.
Right, so that's a practical element, which is this may become relevant again. You and I both know that it's been 1,500 years, it hasn't become relevant. They didn't know that, but we know. The other truth we hold is, maybe this is my truth, and I won't put it on you, which is that Jewish learning like this gives us something else. There's another benefit we get that's not about the temple. There's something we can learn about the sacrifices that are relevant. We were talking about this, the promises we make. We weren't having that conversation. We were having the conversation because of the offerings, right? We learned all sorts of things about the promises that we make. So, yes, we talk about them because we hope that they're still relevant in the eyes of the rabbis of the Gemara. I personally am not interested in starting animal sacrifices again. That's a conversation for another day. But I do think that there is benefit in us being in relationship to these offerings and having a conversation about them.
Well, you can make the case that all of contemporary Judaism is a study in how we take sort of these ancient irrelevant things and make them relevant to us today. So in addition to the idea of like we're preserving this because we might rebuild the temple, there's also the possibility the temple will not be rebuilt. And then what does it mean to be Jewish? And that's the second half of it.
Well, in some respects, it's sort of like the U.S. Constitution, how it's been interpreted over the years.
Similar.
It's a living document,
Right,
as how that's understood.
Right.
I think Gemara is like that too.
You know, sometimes it could use a little pepping up, though.
Yeah, no argument there. All right.
No, but I mean, I think your point is excellent. That when they take this, what we just did in the top of the page of the Baraita, they took. I'm reflecting on the fact that every single word in that verse, they're drashing somehow. They're to every single word. I checked. Like all the words in that verse are interpreted in that Baraita. And the question is that overkill? And that's effectively what we're being asked now. Like, why do we need to reinterpret this when we've already got it?
Not the process. This choice, right? Not the process. The process is still valuable.
Oh, absolutely. No. The choice of why you bother to reinterpret this verse word by word.
Okay.
All right, let's keep going. We're going to spend a little bit more time with the Gemara frustrated with itself, and then we're going to get somewhere interesting. Okay? Can someone else read for us who hasn't read yet? Go for it. The Kvod Harav. And do.
And do?
Yeah.
And do. This is a warning to the court to make you fulfill your vow. Why do I need this derivation? This rule is derived from the verse, he shall offer it. as it is taught in the Baraita. Did you give us that one?
I did.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so here, let's just make sure we're mapping this out in our head. We have a Baraita that's teaching us about this verse. Here's what this verse means, and here's all these different things. And then another section of Gemara is going to say, wait a second, we didn't need that Baraita. We knew all this stuff already. Then this is plugging in another Baraita, like indented. We know that because here's another Baraita. All right, I just want to. If we had an outline, this one would be a little indented.
And the phrase in that it's the first verse on the sheet, and it's in the second line, Yakrivoto.
Right. So why don't you read the whole verse also?
Oh, okay. The whole verse is.
Yeah, that's why I gave him. Don't normally do.
If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall make his offering a male without blemish. He shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting for acceptance's behalf of the Lord. Okay. So what the Gemara is saying here is that we don't need this vasita business of warning, fulfill your vow, because we already know that from that verse we just read in Leviticus, where it says, Yakrivoto, you shall offer it. As it is taught in Baraita, the verse states, he shall offer it, which teaches that he must be forced to bring his offering. One might have thought that he may be forced to bring his offering even against his will. Therefore, the verse states, in accordance with his will, so that's lirtzono right after that in the verse.
Which is translated here on his behalf, right, in the verse sheet that I gave you. Right. But here, it's the same words translated differently. Keep going.
In accordance with his will, how so? The court coerces him until he says, I want to bring the offering.
I want you to pay your promise to the shul. No.
Exactly. Now, since all these halachot are already known from other sources, what is the point of this repetition?
Great. So I want to jump to the side here and just read a little bit of these notes, because I think, this is also, we want to learn some of the background on this. Would someone read for me at the top of the page where it says notes, teaches that he must be forced? Maybe someone with nice eyesight, good eyesight. Go for it.
Tosafot note that this would seem to be included in the principle that the court has the authority to compel a person to observe any positive mitzvah. Tosafot Yeshanim and Tosafot and Rosh explain that since offerings must be brought, quote, that he may be accepted before the Lord, Leviticus 1:3, one might have thought that no coercion whatsoever may be used. Therefore, a special verse was needed to teach that the court may force one until he says that he wants to bring.
So here's our resolution,
really
right? This has a resolution here, right? Which is their presumption when you read this verse in Leviticus might be that they have to want to do it, and therefore can't do it with coercion. And so the kind of coercion that the Gemara is imagining is forcing them to say, "I want to do it," right?
So that whole translation. The translation of according to his will makes a lot more sense with this explanation than in his behalf.
Right. That's because when we every translation is an interpretation, right?
But I'm saying
right.
That
one works better for this, 100%. Right. Lirtzono, to his will. Okay. So I want to also just jump down where it says halacha at the bottom, the second section, coercion by the court. Cindy, will you read again?
All right. Until he says, I want to.
No, the one above it. The one above it.
Oh, the one above it. Okay, sorry. Coercion by the court. If one is obligated to bring a burnt offering, a peace offering, or another offering, the court coerces him to fulfill his obligation. And it may seize his property until he brings his offering. The court is commanded to coerce him immediately so that he will sacrifice his offering on the next festival.
Right, those are the references, right? And if you read the next one, it goes to Rabbi Stein's point. Keep going.
When the court coerces a person to sacrifice an offering, or similarly, to give his wife a bill of divorce, it does not coerce him into doing it so entirely against his will. Rather, it applies pressure and imposes punishments until the person agrees to do it on his own.
Now, outside of the example of some rabbinic courts putting men in jail who are not giving gets to their wives, so if we bracket that one, very rarely did a court actually have this power. It's one thing to say, I have the authority to do it. It's another to be able to actually implement it. And the rabbis here are no, right? They are self-aware enough to say, we don't really have this power. Right? We don't really, we have it, but we can't really do it. Right. So I think this is really valuable for us to know, just in terms of getting ourselves inside the rabbinic mindset. Okay, let's keep going a little bit more. Okay.
Should have given them that power. That would have been a good thing.
Okay, so we learned, right, that we have this thing where it says "and do" in our original Baraita. Just to review, this means that the court has the power to enforce us. However, this Baraita says we already learned it from somewhere, right? So we're really grading against this Baraita. The Gemara really wants us to dislike this original Baraita. We're rubbing up against it. Lots of tension. Okay, someone read for me the Gemara answers. Someone who hasn't read yet.
The Gemara answers. One set of verses is referring to a case where one said that he vowed to bring an offering but did not yet set aside a specific animal for his vow. And one set of verses is referring to a case where he set aside a specific animal for his vow but did not yet sacrifice it on the altar.
Great. Here we have our sort of resolution. What is it? What did we just learn from this?
How far along you've gotten in the process.
Right. So we have these two verses, these two Baraitot that are saying, we have this, we already know stuff from here. Why are you teaching us A when we knew it from B? Or we could switch the letters, doesn't really matter. Right? And we're learning that from this section of Talmud, A and B refer to different parts of the process.
And very typical of the Talmud.
Right.
Because, when you look at Mishnah, right, there's lots of contradictions and different opinions, which the rabbis of the Talmud are just inclined to disagree. Who are we to disagree with these great scholars, our ancestors? So it's very typical to say, okay, well, this applies in this situation, and this applies in this situation, so they're both right. They just apply in different cases.
Right. I mean, I think that's like the entire process, right? This and this seem to disagree. They can't, axiomatically, so they must mean different things. It's what the Gemara does to the Mishnah, to Baraita, and to the Torah. It's what the Tosafot do to the Talmud, right? It's that whole process ongoing.
I think it's the Ninth Circuit, the one out in California that does all these things.
You say more?
No, that's what Trump says. The Ninth Circuit is too liberal.
Okay, I'm not sure where I follow where that comes from here.
Different opinions. It's just, that's
got
what
it,
I
got
mean.
it.
He needs a different court to be reviewing
Got
the
it.
same.
Got it. I'm with you now. Okay, so instead of going further, we're gonna stop there and we'll pick up. So we made some progress here. So let me pull out a couple of takeaways that I think are valuable. First, right, that it can be beneficial to dig deep into a single verse. There's a lot packed in there. It's like if I'm a science fiction fan, so if you ever watch Doctor Who, right? The TARDIS is bigger on the inside, right?
Yeah.
Verses are bigger on the inside, right? Exactly. The second thing is that not every interpretation, right? These different verses can't come teach us the same thing. We have to learn new things. That process of this engine, right? This rabbinic engine of pulling out new things is why this is still a living document. And third, right, which is that we have to hold multiple things at the same time. These things can't mean the same thing, so we got to hold different things. We have to hold that the offerings are both immediately relevant and not super relevant, right? We have to hold all of these things simultaneously. And it's that practice that makes Talmud so valuable, is being able to hold all these things kind of all at the same time.
That's what it means to be Jewish.
It is definitely what it means to be Jewish. We'll stop there. If you would like to keep the verse sheets, you can, but they do have God's name on it. So if you're not going to keep them, I will take them back. Good.